Hey everybody, welcome to ReadyTech. Super happy on this week's episode to welcome Sam Phillips, CTO and Co-Founder of Residently. Sam and I have known each other for a number of years, and I know you're going to hate this, but because you're a really humble and modest guy, but Sam is somebody that really invests in the community, really invests in giving back, is truly passionate about creating a world-class culture. It's not by chance or luck that Sam has been able to be in a number of businesses, either co-founded or an early stage employee that has gone all the way through to IPO or some form of exit. He was the first developer on the beach, which was built in 2005, sold in 2007, is now a major UK travel agent with an IPO in 2015. He then moved on to be head of engineering at Shutl. He led a major replatforming, launched in the US, and was part of the team that sold the business to eBay in 2013. Now a CTO and co-founder of Residently, Sam's building a global platform that empowers renters to thrive in their homes. We've got a lot of topics to cover in this episode, from hiring, culture, high-performing teams, the minds of tomorrow. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hey Sam, welcome. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning at a super early hour. I was actually going to say what you're having for breakfast, but it's too early.
Well, I read that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but I actually read that Kellogg came up with that idea as a slogan, right? But I have a Kellogg's brand-based cereal and a vitamin D tablet to start my day. I'm a night owl, so very low on concentration in the morning. Have to keep things very, very simple. So yeah, that's about as complicated as breakfast gets to me.
I always like to try and, with the first question, expand the mind a little bit. And because every guest that we have on the show has their own kind of unique perspective. For you, what is technology?
Yeah, I really struggle with these visionary sorts of questions. I'm kind of a boring person when it comes to technology. I like to take things that work well, could be computers, could be process, and apply them to consumer settings. You know, I mean, like, it's an old hat now to say when the iPhone came out, it didn't really have new features. It didn't really have new tech, although I'm sure it under the bonnet did. So for me, technology is any innovation that improves our lives. Could be computerized, but could be mechanical. I mean, we're in the Northwest after all, where, you know, the cotton technology changed this area an awful lot. So anything that improves our lives, I think, counts.
What do you think that we're doing right in the world right now with leveraging technology as an example?
Do you know, I think, obviously this is a decade in a year we've had, right? And that's what people are starting to say, and a huge catalyst. Mm-hmm. I mean, as a technologist, I'm impressed by the resilience of what's happened, right? I'm impressed with Zoom and Meet and all these things being able to scale up and do what they've been able to do and keep things going. I mean, it's been remarkably smooth. I think you think about how often Gmail is down or Zoom is down now. It's almost never. And same with Slack, right? I think that's crazy good considering the demands on those companies and those, you know, almost utilities now. So yeah, that's what impresses me about the world of technology right now.
Is there an innovation that you read about or you see firsthand that you just think, yeah, this is cool, this is exciting?
I'm not so much a futurologist, but how good is mobile now? The hype is over, right? Everyone's just like, yeah, mobile. But the UX folks have fought and won a real battle. Mobile first, app first, so much better than desktop a lot of the time. And even people who previously would have said, you know, this is the job that requires a laptop, they're happy. I've been looking at mortgage applications on my phone the other day. It's amazing how good mobile is. And I think there's been a really quiet and impressive innovation there from 5 years ago when a lot of mobile experiences were really poor and unusable. That's just not the case now. You can really do things on your phone that even a few years ago you couldn't.
Absolutely. I think it's slowly crept up on us in a nice way, for sure, because from a productivity standpoint, even communicating on a personal level or being productive in a professional setting, I think it's just the slow but persistent innovation that's happened there has just been allowed us to be a lot more seamless and a lot more productive, both personally and professionally. You're a person that's been heavily within kind of the startup scale up world. Now, if you kind of exited from Residently, that would be your third successful kind of exit. A wealth of experience for those startup entrepreneurs, founders out there. And I know this is probably the million dollar kind of question, but if you was to meet an entrepreneur on the street or on a video call, whatever that might be, what would your advice be to them? Kind of where would you focus? Maybe if they weren't from a technology kind of background, what would you say?
It's the $1 million question, and maybe it's the $1 answer, but I think the common advice is still the best, but I'll build on it a little bit. Get out to the market and learn what your customers want and learn what they're actually going to pay money for. And a lot of founders still struggle when I speak to them about how little they can launch with. At Residently, we're the world's home brand. We want to make renting and buying a false dichotomy and the experience of living in a property extremely different. But we started really as a sort of slightly digital lettings agency. And the question straight away came to me of sort of like, how long till we go live? How long till it's done? And I was like, well, most lettings agencies don't have any technology at all. There's a phone there. We've got a Rightmove account. Let's go. Let's start learning today what we should build. And starting really straight away with no product delay. And I, as a product person, hate being the delaying person, right? Starting with no delay at all meant learning could start immediately. And started us on the process for me, which is what is the real super weapon when you're working with technology and you're non-technically minded, which is absolute clarity and agreement on what is important and what is in scope and what we're going to build in what sequence. I used to really think that project management even was magic. How on earth can you keep track of things? How can you know what's going on? And it's not magic. You just have to grind out the detail. You have to be really clear on what we're going to build, what problem we're solving for, what is the absolute bare minimum we can go with. You have to be very clear on what you can start with and what you can go with, right? And you have to avoid lack of clarity and lack of alignment within your own team, or maybe you're just the one co-founder on what is going to be built. Because those, we didn't know that, or we didn't know we had to fix that. Those are the conversations which really hurt projects and they really hurt companies. So yeah, I guess what's the minimum you can do and write it down.
You only really start learning once you get something into your customers' hands. And then from that point, you kind of really only start truly being able to understand whether or not your kind of hypothesis is accurate or not. And you often see sometimes, though, from organizations, next question kind of comes on to maybe pitfalls. Are there any pitfalls that you see, or tech pitfalls specifically, that you see? Sometimes we're too quick to build things and then maybe not thinking about the basic practice and principles of good engineering. And you kind of keep building and building and building. And then 6, 12, 18 months, even longer, got to address some of the areas by perhaps moving too quick. Do you see any consistent pitfalls with entrepreneurs from a technology perspective?
I never worry about moving too quick, right? If you've got something that people are going to buy, then everything will be forgiven. And I think, and things are forgiven on a product perspective. Like, gosh, I am a massive advocate of WhatsApp, and I know again it's one of the biggest products in the world. It's used in Europe way more than it is, for example, in the US. But WhatsApp it's got a dreadful name. There's lots of its UI is absolutely terrible. When it came out as a competitor to SMS, it was unbelievably good. It was unbelievably quick, and the group functionality was so much better. And so we all put up with the mess. And we all put up with the nastiness as a consumer. And I think you can do the same thing as a CEO about worrying about too much tidiness, too much scalability. I never have a problem with, we're a year in, people love our service, but they're overwhelming it with demand. I mean, fantastic. What a story to go and tell an investor. No problem at all. I think what I see CEOs often doing is staying a little bit too far out of that detail. You should be the product visionary as a CEO, and you need to be in that project detail on the tiny, tiny decisions that need to be made. Where exactly is this button going to go? What exactly is going to happen with this business logic? Because if you don't make them, somebody else has to. If there's a dev sitting there, they then have to go and make that decision. So I think it's important to be in that detail, to be clear on how little we can build, and to be clear on how we can go out and learn. And me, I never worry about, is this going to, if we get overwhelmed by users on the first day, will the whole thing crash? I mean, happy days. Great. Turn the whole thing off. You've got an eager audience ready to be teased about it and teed up, ready for the real launch, right? I think people get that now. I really do.
You've got that CEO or that the entrepreneur, the founder, and sat there with a vision, with an idea. What is the first priority hire for you?
Simon Wardley talks about pioneers, settlers, town planners, right? Which is, I think, is a slightly less aggressive version of the old commandos, infantry, military, police idea. What this means is when you're just starting, when you're trying to build a new country from scratch or a new town or a new company, you need people who are very versatile and ready to work in a low planning, fast discovery environment. And this is important that you have these sorts of people at the start. And it's important I often join companies after the start when they've got the thing that works and they now need to make it work efficiently. And that's where you bring in the settlers. That's when you bring in the people who aren't quite so fast and loose with the rules, but maybe not so versatile. In detail, that means that I think about there are lots of devs who are pretty good at UX and pretty good at building, and they can turn their hands to anything. These generalists are gold dust for me. They're the pioneers I'm talking about, and they don't mind if they're digging a well. They don't mind if they're finishing a roof or helping the sick. There's no point in having a team of all well diggers if that's all they can do at that very early stage. So generalists and people who are ready to be flexible and work on all sorts of different things and focus entirely on the immediate goal, which is, getting shelter over your head for that night. So that's what I do at the start. And I try and avoid specialists for as long as it makes sense.
As a CTO and as a co-founder, what do you feel your purpose is?
As a leader generally, my job is to provide an environment where great work can be accomplished with minimal bureaucracy, clear decision-making, loads of context flying around, and transparency. A trusting, safe place to work, somewhere where things could be tried, things can fail. And I set the tone within the team of how failure is handled, how we communicate, how we treat each other, and how to build an inclusive workplace that supports a diverse workforce. So that's my job as a leader, to create all of that safety and to create all of that context. I really believe this, that my product, my output is the team. I'm building the machine that builds the machine. So for example, I'm never coding, although I can and I love to. I seldom am. Then as a technical leader, my job, I guess, is probably threefold, right? Firstly, I'm trying to support and encourage productive engineering practices and to deliver to the business a product and engineering capability that it can rely on. Secondly, I'm trying to make sure that decisions made in terms of strategy and tactics and go-to-market are done with how technology can best support in mind. And thirdly, it's my job to understand what's going on all around the business. I make a point of reading every single email that comes into our customer service to understand everything that's going on around the business and let people know where I think, there's an opportunity here for technology to help. And what's more, it's going to align with everything we're building in any case. Because a lot of folks don't understand where technology can be utilized. So I try and show those opportunities as well.
Just want to reiterate something that you just said there about reading every customer service email that comes in to see where technology can play a part. You mentioned detail a number of times, and that is just so kind of critical, especially in a kind of a product-focused organization. One of the things that you also mentioned in that answer was about failure. And sometimes being a leader is also about vulnerability. I'm sure you've failed many, many, many times, given that, you've been a founder. This will be your kind of third time. If you was to kind of look back, would you say has been your kind of highest or most memorable product or project failure?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's lots of different types of failure, right? And I've done them all for sure. I've had a few project failures where the whole thing had to be cancelled. Usually that's because we literally were just building the wrong thing, or we thought that something was feasible when it wasn't. And I've done that. I was part of a login system for a big company where literally the entire design was predicated on a certain type of cookie working, and it's beyond the restrictions of technology. It doesn't work. So I've had all the way from like, wow, we really didn't check the very, very base foundation of this. I've ended up on projects that have been massively underthought through and took forever to complete, and you end up in miserable death marches. And I've done those for certain. And I've also spent time building the wrong thing entirely. I spent months once leading a billing project I was coding too. It was so complicated and so hard to build, and we'd really not thought about how we were going to launch it. By the time we were sort of getting to done, the business model had changed and the whole thing went in the bin. And of course, I've done lots of stupid things as well. And I've worked on teams that have done that. Shutl, where I was head of engineering for a few years, we did same-day delivery, which meant we had API integrations with same-day couriers. And in the classic development mistake, we had downloaded production data, sanitized the personal information, but accidentally left live API credentials for couriers, to the point that developers were running their test suites and people were starting to drive around London picking up fake orders from fake places. So I've done the whole spectrum of that for sure. Loads and loads of those. But every one that we've managed to mitigate has been through this clarity on what we actually need to build.
You touched on one thing there, business model changing and throwing everything in the bin. One of the things sometimes that I see that often comes up, certainly between the partnership between financing or commercial and engineering, do you find that there's maybe a contradiction, or do you find that actually it's important that engineering also has an emphasis or an understanding from a financial or commercial kind of aspect before they start or whilst they're perhaps doing something?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I'm not into R&D. I'm not into technology for technology's sake. I see myself as an investor in product solutions, right? We think that an investment of this amount of time in this sort of area is going to bring a commercial result, a success for a consumer. So I don't see a contradiction between what we're building and what the commercial result is, because I think that's the only reason we're building it in the first place. Now, the job of software engineering is balancing commercial and pragmatic needs with the need to create clean, maintainable code and architecture. That's for sure. I'm afraid that is the job. Outside of a research organization, I think that's the best way for it to be understood.
What do you think the role is of engineering?
Yeah, I mean, I think the role of engineering is to work on ideas, come up with ideas, show how technology can be deployed, validate those ideas, and solve problems. I always want to be business and user led. A team that I'm leading or involved with will not have a roadmap that somehow is unrelated to what's being needed commercially. It's all the same. I don't believe in engineering for engineering's sake. So I always encourage the awkward and difficult, painful conversation that you have to have as an organization of what is important. It's an essential step for an organization. And oftentimes it's what can we prioritize within technology, because we are often the most constrained resource. It's often that is the impetus for that conversation to happen, which I think is probably a positive thing.
As a CTO in an organization where engineering is not empowered, what would your advice be to say, how should a company optimize or leverage engineering as a function?
One of the key things I try to do is to build stakeholder skills for, I don't really like to say, Michael, I don't really like to say non-technical people, but I've yet to come up with a better version.
You can.
What I find many organizations are using their technology functions as essentially commodity, as if the code is in developers' heads just waiting to be mined out, right? Quarried out. So you often hear, oh, we need this or we need that. We need to build this, we need to build that. And it's a natural response as a user of a system to say it would be better if this system did this. So it's been the work of project and product managers for years to step back and understand what problem we're trying to solve. I think that the natural extension of that is to really get engineering thinking on the problem. Rather than building a solution, a preordained one, engineering thinking of a problem, understanding the context. So providing that context, making sure that they can care about the customer and empathize because they're getting data points. And then they're ready to start saying, right, well, how do we solve problems? If you don't do that, I think you're losing the big advantage of having in-house technical people. They're very expensive people, very capable people, and they end up as just code monkeys. So that's how you empower. I think the bigger question, and I hadn't really thought about this, but the bigger question is, how do you transform an organization from one that doesn't recognize the value to one that does? And the only way I've ever found to do that is to start building some prototypes. And when I've been in transformation programs, that's what they do. They just start. I mean, you've been involved with GDS yourself. Just start building things and showing how fast things can move without all these things you think you need.
One of the misconceptions, certainly in a number of organizations, we're talking about engineering-led output versus outcome, and looking at how can we, as an overall entity of our organization, deliver value, and what problems are we trying to solve. And sometimes the most simplest way is to show value to the business by doing. I get the prototyping. I absolutely agree with it. In some cases, it's absolutely the route that you need to go down. Now, I know, we've known each other for some time now, a number of years. I know how important culture is to you, and I know how important teams are, and building the right teams and empowering them to make the right decisions. And how do you kind of design your engineering teams?
First thing, what is a team? It is not a group of people sat together. A team is a group of people with a shared job to do. And in an engineering context, as a fan of building agile teams and getting involved in extreme programming practices such as pair programming, for me, a team is we really, really are sharing a workload. We really are sharing a view towards a mission goal. So my definition of a team is, if, Michael, you and I are teammates and I'm sick, you're going to be able to pick up my work tomorrow. That is a team. We are working on the same stuff. So the key to me is to start creating cross-functional teams that have shared goals and can go anywhere and solve any problem. I see a lot of organizations who, and I won't pretend I am the CTO that you have when you have 1,000 people inside the engineering function, right? I try and get myself moved to something by then. But in terms of startup and scale up, you still see a lot of folks who hire and structure in a really siloed way. Oh, we've got one person for APIs, they're on database, they're on front end, they're on back end, right? And all of a sudden you end up with, right, but you need every single one of those people to do anything, because nothing is just API and nothing is just database. And then the next step is they scale that to an API team, a database team, a front-end team, and a back-end team. And I mean team not as a community of practice, a group of people who do the same job, but I mean literally those teams have their own backlogs, their own ways of working. I worked at a big retailer where the testing team had a completely separate backlog from the developers, which meant it was entirely feasible for the developers to finish something, but it not to be priority at all for the testers, which meant that it wouldn't go live, which is crazy, right? So I really like a cross-functional team that doesn't have these dependencies. I really like a team where the work can come into that team, and if they need to go all the way up to a style sheet or all the way down to the AWS setup, they can. Doesn't mean everybody has to be full stack, but it means as a group with a shared objective and mission goal in mind, they can do it. And you've got to keep them small, right? You've got to keep that to 10, 8 people so that psychological safety can thrive and people can know one another and build relationships. So that's how I start my design.
Psychological safety, it's something that we starting to hear more and more about in terms of the teams, and about empowerment and accountability, end-to-end kind of ownership. And these are a number of things, obviously, that are important to kind of teams. Do you have a formula for setting your teams up for success?
I really do work on collaboration and teamwork. I've done my time as agile consultant or joining transformation projects. And what you often find is not waterfall. It's a complete absence of any process at all. So I start with teamwork. I start with, right, what is this group of people working on? And let's hope it's only one or two of the same things, and let's centralize it and let's work on that until it's good. And then we'll work on the next thing and onwards. That helps you start to create a repeatable capability for development, right? A repeatable capability for taking ideas and taking problems and solving them, rather than inventing process every time and having each individual within a team having essentially, they have to be their own product manager, their own project manager. They're running their own backlogs, their own prioritization. They're getting pressures from their own stakeholders. I always put a PM on a team, a product manager, who is there to help with delivery and help with stakeholder work, not to insulate engineers from the business and not to insulate them from reality, but just to make sure that they have a consistent way of agreeing priorities and a consistent way of having process. So once you've got a team that follows a consistent, repeatable process, all of a sudden you've got a capability. I think I said this right at the start. You've got a capability the business can start to rely on. You've got a capability which has a way of making sure that things aren't constantly crashing and servers aren't running out of disk space. Been a while since we had servers, but same idea. And you've got a way of consistently putting into the top of this funnel a problem and having product come out the other way and the other end and solutions come out the other end. Teamwork and process. And I invest a lot of time in it.
One of the things from an organization point of view, which sometimes perhaps businesses where they have built and there is technology debt and there is business as usual, but then it's also important to work on the things which are solving customer problems and in some descriptions could be classed as innovation. Within these teams that have end-to-end accountability, how are they organized to kind of tackle those three things kind of simultaneously? How do you structure, how do you organize those teams to address those three areas of technology debt, BAU, and innovation?
There's definitely a few very tactical ways to deal with this. And it's very organizationally dependent. When you work at a very large organization, it can be quite different. BAU is an interesting one, right? Business as usual. I hate being the guy who is in a meeting and someone says, how long is it going to take to change this button from red to green? And you're like, well, this is a question of two halves, really. Or three halves. This is a question of how long does the actual work take, to which the answer is really not very long at all. Then you've got the question of how long is this work going to take to get deployed once completed, which if you've not got repeatable processing for consistent and repeatable deployments, can be a depressingly long amount of time. And then you've got the real thing where you feel really stupid, which is, well, we can't possibly change the color of the button because we'd have to pause this entire massive project that we're working on, which we know is the right thing to work on. It's the most important thing for the business. I hate being in that room and being that person when I know as a developer, it's actually pretty easy to make this small change. So there's a couple of things I've done over the years which have worked really well. I think it's common for folks to build out a sort of fast response team. This can be rotating folks onto a team maybe for a week or two at a time, and they're going to have the fun of working on just little tasks. Job one, you get a big list of all your little tasks. And I mean little, like an hour for somebody who's not super familiar with the code base, really little. So get a big list of these, and then you can think about how to start chopping them down. Some places will have a sort of fast response team, as I say, where they're able to just really, really, really just cycle through them. And as a dev, that's a great team to be on. Me, I love to help. So the idea that I've got a big list of things which the poor person in the not maybe priority team really needs, the idea that I could go and do 10 of those in a week and then send them over, a solution and go to their desk and say, by the way, look, I've done this for you. That's a really motivational thing to do. So really enjoy that. On a smaller team, you can have a fast response lane on the board on whatever sort of visualization you're doing, right? If something important comes up, whoever can just works on it. And then at Residently, we invented a concept which is similar to the general sort of defense of the team idea, i.e. you have somebody assigned every day to questions and product support. We came up with this idea of a sweeper, which was every day we assign one member of the team who's just going to pick up little things just for the one day. And it's a nice break from pairing, which can get quite intense, the opportunity to be super helpful and just knock things out. Also a great learning opportunity for you to work on bits of the code base you don't often. So BAU, there's loads of nice ways to address that and to build yourself the time management essentially to do that. For me, tech debt.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I know I love the concept of the sweeper.
Me too, right? I think it's great. And it's such a fun thing to work on. We have some of our most senior devs, that's their highlight. They go and do that and they're so proud of the 10 things they got done yesterday rather than the longer, more complicated work. So really, that's really worked well for us. When it comes to tech debt, my answer here is all about roadmap alignment. I worked at a large FMCG nutrition-based Cheshire startup, which your listeners will likely be familiar with. And they'd got themselves into a huge amount of technical debt. And what they had not worked out yet, and I really got to contribute to while I was working there, was how to align fixing that debt with keeping the roadmap going. So job one, we need a roadmap. And then job two, we need a list of all the technical problems we have, right? All the really oh my God, I hate going in this area of the code base. And then we did an exercise where once we had these two things side by side, we got the chief architect together and all the product folks and all the project folks, and we worked out where we were going to be spending our time in terms of the code base. What coming up was going to be our opportunity to also take on some technical debt, which is also a good way of identifying where the most important technical debt is, because the areas of the code that are the most difficult to work on because they're either complex or they're fragile, if those areas are also the place that you're going to spend a lot of time doing dev, then it's a really strong investment case to, whilst we're in this code, let's come up with some improvements. Now, I always believe in tidying as you go, refactoring as you go, and working out how far to take that is part of the skill of a software engineer. But aligning that roadmap piece on a slightly higher level was really powerful at that organization. And we started really paying down a lot of technical debt, retiring really old components. And that was really exciting. So that was really fun.
How do you keep the innovation mindset in the team?
A similar sort of thing to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, which is just context and what's going on, right? We're using OKRs now at Residently. Second time with them, this time working much better than the first. Objectives and key results, if folks don't know, I guess Intel, the most famous user of. Having really clear information about what we're trying to achieve in a given time period, but also really clear information on what's going on, how things are working, what is happening on a quantitative level, but also qualitative, right? We have an all hands every Friday. I think a lot of companies do this. Last thing on a Friday, we'll share stories about what's happened in the week, get insights from customers. And the amount of times after that, I get a product manager or a developer or a UX designer on my Slack going, why don't we just do this? This would be so easy and it would create a huge amount of value or solve this awful problem. Sharing that information, getting people inspired, getting people thinking, I think is really the key to that.
A lot of the things that we talked about, empowerment, about sharing, about visibility, about people being able to kind of collaborate, are all really relevant points under the banner of retention of talent. One thing that we kind of haven't touched on is the attraction of. So, for you, what does it take to kind of attract and then retain those technology talents?
The answer is I create this culture and set up basically the environment for engineers to do their best work, for all product people to do their best work, where they're not going to be encumbered by bureaucracy and slowness and, oh my God, getting a purchase order signed off. I'm off to the CEO for that in a 2,000 person company. All these sorts of things make it a very difficult place to work. So I try and make an environment where it is an easy place to work, where it is easy to do the good stuff. And then when we're out recruiting, when we're out talking about the company, we just say, look, this is how it is. And when we're hiring, we invite people to see how it is. We invite people to talk to the team, to look at processes. And when it comes to retention, but maybe what else would we say about attraction, would you say? What else do you think is important?
From an attraction point of view, the most important thing to people when they stumble upon your organization via whatever particular channel is that through the keyhole view. There's many processes out there where people spend so much time on the initial steps, and actually all that, the engineer or all the person coming through the process, like, who am I going to be working with? What's it like to work on that? Give me a very radically honest view of the organization so I can take this information away and make the best educated decision. I think a lot of organizations, it takes the process far too long to give that honest view of, actually, give me access to the people that I'm actually going to be working with. Give me access to the people that are actually going to make the decisions, because that is really what I want. What am I going to be working on? What are the problems that I'm solving? What is it really like? And I think, we create this kind of virtual facade of, oh, this is a really great place to work. And we spend so much time on employee value proposition, but a lot of the key things is just give me that through the keyhole view. Give me that honest view into what your organization is like. And I think we could do that much, much quicker in the process so people can vote with their feet, basically.
One thing I like to do there is have a personality in the process, right? You see a lot of adverts for jobs. This is the best company you've ever heard of. I don't know if I've ever come across an agency that isn't award winning, just as I've never seen a chip shop that isn't chip shop of the year, right? It's just, of course you're award winning. We believe that, but what is it actually like, right? What is the personality? And I get this question in interviews all the time. And then they say, what is the culture of the team? And I say, look, this is our team of people who enjoy doing work and solving problems. We're not a lifestyle company. Obviously everyone's remote now, but when we were there, we weren't the sort of place where you were still there at 7 or 8 o'clock and your whole friendship group wasn't molded around the company. We're not a group of young guys in their 20s with nothing else to do. A lot of us have kids, a lot of us have families, a lot of us have other responsibilities. I don't have a table tennis table in the office, and that's important to me, right? And I have. And I was like, well, why have we set up this place where people have got very, very good at table tennis and table football? Wouldn't they rather do a really satisfying, good job during the day and then go home and be with their loved ones? And that's our personality as a company. And we do other things. We are a startup. We are product driven, right? We are not an agency. We don't have that agency environment. We are a product driven startup with a mission to do. And we are obsessed with residents. We talk about residents and how to help them nonstop. That's not every organization, and it's not the same everywhere. So we try and really have a bit of a personality about it. And then in our hiring process, we involve loads of the team. So you have an initial screening call. That'll be with a tech lead, probably the one that you'll be working with on the team that day, as soon as you start. We then do a remote tech test, which is with 2 of the engineers from the team. Again, really honest, really open, and everyone will give honest questions. And during the interview process, we also have a session where you sit down, and we try and schedule this with a PM, with a UX, with a dev in a little setting. There's no prepped questions. And it's just, right, well, what's it like here? What is it like to work with? How does people talk to one another? And we try and give that view, as you say, for a startup, which we're so busy actually solving the problems. Our own website is, needs a lot of work, and our employer brand work that we do is quite limited. But we try and, during these processes, make it clear what you're signing up for, and thinking, is this somewhere that I think I'll enjoy, or is it a different sort of place that I would enjoy?
I know another area of interest and passion for you is your kind of community activity that you do outside of kind of your time at Residently, and where you can give back. So this question is more geared towards the minds of tomorrow. Therefore, somebody who perhaps is thinking about choosing a career in technology in today's kind of world, what would your advice be?
Well, obvious advice. I think it is a fantastic career. And I think that it is a sector where there's a lot of variety possible. You can do a lot of things. I know people who they work in customer success and sales, but they always work within technology organizations because they recognize the culture benefits that a lot of them have, right? So it's not about being an engineer necessarily. I think these organizations can be places for everybody to do their best work, have a massive impact. And there's a huge range of stuff you can work on in terms of your speciality. But also everywhere is technology now. Everywhere has a technology team. So you could work at nonprofits. You can work in business tools. You can work in investment. You can work in really any sector you can name. So I think it's great I think it's a great and varied opportunity. And as an engineering manager, I also think management within technology is a way of providing an awful lot of good to the world, and providing an awful lot of good to individuals in their work. So my advice is start building something. I think we all started on no-code tools, they're called now. I started on Microsoft Front Page. Get onto Webflow, get onto Squarespace, and start building stuff. It doesn't have to be that you then graduate to actually coding, but you can start understanding how technology can make a difference, how technology can make your life easier, which I think is so empowering and so interesting for those who find it that way. And if you're from an underrepresented group in technology, which sadly there are many, there's quite a lot of extra support for you now. I've worked with Code First Girls, and until the pandemic, I was the organizer of the Manchester Code Bar chapter. I always take an opportunity to talk about Code Bar. It's an amazing global charity which works bringing underrepresented groups of people into tech, very focused on education and very focused on those who are trying to get into tech from nothing, or those who are in their first role. And they run weekly workshops, used to be in person, used to be all over the world. Now it's several times a week workshops online, and an amazing organization that I've really enjoyed working with. So I'll big up Code Bar whilst I'm here for sure.
And we'll make sure that any references, if anybody's interested who's listening, check out the show notes and all links to various different organizations and some things that we've referenced around pair programming and extreme programming, etc. Other reference points will be in the show notes. As a global technology leader, founder that's at the heart of kind of technology and solving specific problems, some of them obviously not world problems, but if you had the power through technology to solve one of the world's problems, opportunities, what would you solve?
I'm a learner. I talked a little bit about education and building more inclusive dev communities through improved education. So my priority is education and growing for me and my team. If I am the smartest person or the most knowledgeable person at a company, I tend to start thinking about leaving. Now, it used to be that you could only learn from books. I remember a friend telling me she learned how to put on makeup from a book. And now we've got YouTube and TikTok. I mean, YouTube has become Wikipedia. Sorry, Wikipedia has become YouTube, right? And TikTok is becoming YouTube. And the education content on there is unbelievable. You can learn anything on these platforms now, but you need internet access everywhere for cheap. So that's what I would do, right? This education allows for a way better world. There are people in this world that don't know that contraception exists, or different sexual identities, or different gender identities, or climate change, or revolution. Since the invention of the written word, did we know this education is transformative? To think that at one time the speed information could travel was as fast as somebody could go on a horse. And then we had the telegram and the telephone. And now we have the internet. We have the infrastructure to get information everywhere, but there are still parts of wherever that don't have it. So yeah, if I could do one thing, internet for everybody for super duper cheap.
Sam, always a pleasure. Appreciate all of your honesty, taking the time. Thank you. Truly appreciated. Forward to the next time that we chat.
Thanks, Michael. Lovely to catch up.